All right, I'm here with Josh, and this is seminar S11, which is on the Tonson publishing dynasty. And Josh, I'm going to pull your paper up on screen right now so I have it in front of me. I'm going to move your picture over here. All right, so walk us through the main points of your paper, if you would, please, and thanks.
Yep, certainly. So the paper is really divided into two parts. The first is aimed at establishing that the Tonson publishing cartel really was, to put it mildly, in it for the money and in it to protect their rights so they could make even more money off the rights to all of Shakespeare's work. And as such, they themselves didn't really have too much editorial input into the making of all of the versions and editions that were published under them. However, what they did do was they hired out different editors, normally a very prominent literary figure of the day, to do all of the editing. And the editor would basically give them the work and they would print it off. And as a result of this, I argue that some of the editors, most of the editors, just seem to go absolutely wild with their versions, inserting themselves, inserting their own voices, loads of notes, that sort of thing. And they sort of, the Tonson dynasty, let it happen. And as a result, the big contribution to Shakespeare editing was this introduction of a more prominent editor's voice. And I think we still see a bit of that today, though I suppose it has died down a bit as we've worked more towards the closest approximation we can have to authorial intention. But the legacy left by the Tonsons is no search for the authorial intention, only the editor's interpretation.
Yeah, to me, that I've been working with this topic for a lot of years, and this is a really interesting angle that you've got here. This notion that, ironically, well, let me recap what your argument is. Let me recap your recap. So, Tonson Group, driven totally by money, as you correctly point out, ironically creates a whole bunch of freedom for editors. They get free rein because the money people are not interested in controlling the content whatsoever. Is that fair to say? Is that
I would say that's fair, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think they're not interested in the least in what the final result is. You could say, I suppose, to put a spin on it, that they put 100% confidence in their editors' decisions. But I don't see any evidence when I look at all the stuff about them that was really their concern. And so ironically, we have this flourishing in the 18th century, in this moment in time. We have the emergence of a whole whack of editions that come out where editors are simply going crazy, as you correctly say, inserting them themselves into the text. And this brings us right back to week one in this course, where I talk about the difference between excuse me, transformation and transmission of text. And this is all about transformation of text. And it's true that the editor's presence is very clear, but what's not present is a clearly articulated methodology or theory of editing. Or anything in the preface that tells the reader that this is what the editor's policy is. And this is a great moment for us in the course, and I think you've set us up beautifully for the second term here, because this is only my own opinion, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with an editor inserting themselves into the text, as long as you have made it very clear in the preface that you have done so, and where you have done so, and why you have done so, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I know in this particular paper I've been perhaps in tone a bit disdainful of the editors such as Pope and such inserting themselves into the text.
Yeah.
But a lot of that stems from sort of the way they've done so and how they've, in their prefaces, said this is a reproduction work, this is close to the original, this is how it was intended, and all of the other versions, they've gotten it all wrong.
Yes. So each man is claiming they own the truth.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting. It's kind of like religions in that way, that each religion claims it's got the right pipeline to God, and the other guys have kind of misunderstood it. I'm going to make just a few small observations. This is recording, so you don't have to take notes, but I think it would be helpful to put a piece, not a lot of words, but just in the front. The Tonson dynasty, I'm reading from my notes on my other screen here, but the Tonson dynasty runs from 1695 to 1767. That is 72 years, where they basically dominated all of the Shakespeare publishing in England. And it's 3 generations of Tonsons, right? Jacob Tonson, the first, the second, and the third. So when you think about how long these guys went on, they funded Nicholas Rowe, Alexander Pope, Lewis Tybalt, Warburton, Johnson, and I think they even funded Capel. So there's 5 or 6 editors, almost like a huge chunk of the editors that we're talking about in this section of the course were all funded and paid for by the Tonson Group. It's amazing. And so this didn't happen by accident. And most of the plays they purchased from this guy named Herringman, who owned the rights to F4. I'm just going to go to our course page here, and you'll see for this week, there's a note on F4, published 1685 by R. Bentley, E. Brewster, R. Chiswell, and H. Herringman. And Herringman owned most of the publishing rights to F4. And that's why so many of these editors that all published under the Tonson Group are all kind of going back to F4 as their base text. There's nothing inherently superior about the F4 edition. It's just that that's the edition that the Tonsons owned the rights to. And so here you have a case of money trumping editorial choice. There's so many better choices in F4. I mean, even F1 is better. Q2 would have been ideal. But that's the first point. I have some notes here that they bought it for cheap. Tonson, my note says, paid £140 for 100 copies of F4. Now, they were also buying up all the copies of F4, right? Possibly so they can reuse them. But clearly, as you point out, this is a monopoly. Now, I've got a note here. They paid Nicholas Rowe. I've got a note that talks about the amount of money that Tonson paid their editors in pounds, and then what that amount was in 2003. So that's 15 years ago in US dollars. But they paid Nicholas Rowe £36, which is about $7,000 in 2003. So, I don't know, $10,000 by today's standards. It's not bad. $10,000 to put out an edition. Alexander Pope, now don't forget, Pope is a big name because he's the poet laureate. But they paid him £217, which would have been, in 2003, $44,000. Probably $60,000 today to put out an edition. That's good money for these guys. Tybalt got paid 1,100. No, is that right? Doesn't make sense. Tybalt got paid the equivalent of about $250,000. and Johnson got the equivalent of about $210,000. So they paid handsomely as well. They weren't shy about, so it's not like they, how do I want to put this? It's not like they ripped off their editors. Everybody made money. And the other thing you should add to your paper is that the emergence of what they call bardolatry, the worshipping of the bard as the great Shakespeare, really starts in the 18th century. It looks like all these editors are doing it individually, but it's all coming from the Tonson group. That's their significance to editing. And the irony, as you say, is that the pursuit for money and profit actually led to a very significant moment in Shakespearean history, the editing. Further comments, or are you good?
No, that's excellent.
Excellent. We'll stop it there.